Before Batman, Arkham's rookie sheriff takes on Gotham's darkest underworld. Like, share and subscribe. Episode 11, Zeus Hotel. The theme design of Zeus Hotel is based on the ancient Greek style. 12 towering white marble pillars are like supporting the temple of the ancient Greek gods. The hall is magnificent, with portraits of Greek gods hanging on the walls. There is also a statue of the Greek priest Zeus holding a punishing thunderbolt in the front of the hall. The huge statue looks so majestic that mortals can only look up and feel the unfathomable greatness and terror of the divine power. But Niji dismissed this. Maxi Zeus, the owner of the Zeus Hotel, really thinks of himself as Zeus descending to Earth, but this is just a word in Gotham if it reaches the ears of Wonder Woman on Paradise Island. Unless this hotel is demolished, Wonder Woman Diana has a good temper. After all, Zeus is her biological father. Mumu, I'm a little nervous. Jerry, who was wearing a suit, said very unpromisingly. His broad body looked like a bodyguard in the suit, and at least he looked very good. Calm down. Mr. Cabson, you have to show your courage. This place is not a man-eating tiger. What are you afraid of? Look at Otis. Niji turned to point at Otis and was momentarily speechless. Otis's whole body froze nervously, like a wax figure in a funny movie, standing there motionless. Some of the well-dressed and expensive guests couldn't help but smile when they saw their appearance. They didn't mean anything malicious, they just felt a little funny. Niji was wearing a dark striped suit, with his hands in his pockets, an unlit thin cigar in his mouth, and reflective black leather shoes on his feet, tapping the ground impatiently. Sorry, I'm late. Oswald hurried in from outside, wearing a shiny oily hair, tie, and a valuable custom-made suit, and he was very gentlemanly. When I walked in, I opened the door for a lady and let her in first, which is simply a model. In comparison, Niji and the others look like street gangsters. Waiter, get ready to serve. We have reserved table 31 in the revolving restaurant. Niji raised his hand and called out gracelessly. The waiter, who had been waiting nearby for a long time, smiled awkwardly. He was obviously helpless towards these nouveau riches, but he still stretched out his hand in a professional manner and said, "Please come over here." Niji and the others followed the waiter towards the elevator, and halfway through they found Otis still standing there. Niji ran over and pushed Otis directly into the elevator. I'll get 4 of the steaks that are very well done, and a bottle of Louis Roederer champagne, and cream of mushroom soup, and 4 of this caviar. I'll have chocolate cake for dessert, and 4 grilled chicken legs. Niji sat on a chair, holding a menu and ordering dishes. The waiter, who was taking notes nearby, nodded quickly, not caring about the appetizers or the afterdishes. In short, the cost of this meal is definitely a qualified guest, and he must be served as God. Is there anything else you want? Order it for yourself. Niji put the menu on the table. Jerry and Otis shook their heads quickly, and Oswald said with a smile, "That's enough." Then let's try it too. I'm really looking forward to the skills of the chef here. Niji smiled and leaned on the chair. Well, I saw in the TV series that people eat 7 ripe ones. Isn't it a bit embarrassing to eat 10 ripe ones? Jerry looked around and whispered. Come on, 10 rare is the most delicious, and it's also the test of the chef. The key is that the steak that is cooked at 10 rare can still remain tender, so the meat quality must be very good. Mumu, you are very knowledgeable about this, but it is true that some bastards always like to use inferior steaks to fool people. Oswald laughed and joked, and Niji laughed without explaining. Without even a few words of conversation, the champagne was served and the dishes were placed on the table one after another. Everyone, I won't say anything more. Today we are gathered here as friends who can talk to each other. Cheers! Niji raised the wine glass in his hand, Jerry and the others also raised their wine glasses, and they touched each other. By the way, Oswald, this is Otis Flanagan, our friend we made in Arkham. Niji extended his hand and introduced Oswald. Otis looked surprised. Nice to meet you, Mr. Flanagan. You are a friend of Mumu and the others, which is also my friend. Oswald stretched out his hand and shook hands with Otis seriously, with a sincere smile on his face. Otis was very flattered and sat on the chair restrainedly. He had never even thought about this place, let alone eating here, or with friends. Otis, you don't need to be so restrained. We are all ordinary people. We may be a little worse than you. Niji smiled and waved his hand. Oswald held the wine glass and thought for a moment and then said, Mumu, can I ask you a favor? You said it. Niji nodded. Oswald helped them, and they should help each other again if there is something they need. Only by helping each other can they be helped for a long time. Well, do you have a guy in Arkham who can sew people together? Sewn together? After Jerry heard this, he was a little confused. What is suturing together? Is it the kind of doctor who sews scars together? Oswald shook his head, cut off a piece of steak with a table knife and threw it into his mouth. While chewing, he said, it's the kind where you sew a person's hands on their feet and cut off their face and sew it on their belly. There have been several cases in the Lower East Side. One of my boys encountered one. His 5-year-old brother disappeared. His hands and feet were chopped off and sewn together. I have to help him take revenge. Niji, who was sitting next to him, picked up his wine glass and took a sip. His brows wrinkled slightly. Suturing hands and feet seemed a bit familiar. Like the work of Professor Pigfaced, the centinoplates created by that guy's stitching of monsters all wear pig-faced masks, which are several times more disgusting than the human centipede or the humanoid seal. Does that guy have a pig face mask on his face? Niji asked. Mask? Oswald thought for a moment and shook his head. I don't know, we didn't catch him, but one of my intelligence lines in the police station said that a special investigation team has started to investigate this bastard. I want to kill him with my own hands. When Oswald said this, his voice was very cold. This was an opportunity and a challenge for him. If he could really take revenge, his reputation in the Roman Empire would be even higher. No matter which aspect he considers, he will never let go of the vicious pervert who sews people together like rag dolls. Niji nodded and asked, how do you know that he has gone to Arkham District now? Our area is not an ordinary chaos, and the police in many places cannot intervene. It was discovered by a sergeant from the Gotham Police Department. They found a kidnapped orphan along the sewers. They followed him all the way and will probably go to your police station. By the way, that police chief's name is Gordon. James Gordon is a tough guy. Oswald said solemnly. The policeman who dares not to give face to the Romans is the only one in the entire Gotham Police Department who is retired from the Special Operations Team. When Niji heard the name, a curious look appeared on his face. That was the only conscience of the Gotham Police, Chief Gordon. A policeman who truly protects justice. He is old-fashioned and persistent, but he is also a tragic hero, whether it is his daughter whose spine was broken by Joker, or she was tortured by the villains. It didn't make him waver in the slightest. Maybe this is the kind of person who can emerge from the mire without staining. Niji shook his head. In addition to suturing the limbs, are there any other clues? If it's like this, there is very little news. There are people around him, many, like monsters. Oswald said with a frown, because he didn't know clearly. Okay, I'll pay attention. Niji nodded, and Oswald's cell phone suddenly rang. He raised his hand to signal, bowed apologetically and walked out with his cell phone. After a while, he came back. Sorry, something happened over there. A guy wearing a hood hit one of our people. I have to deal with it. Hood? Batman? What kind of headgear? Niji asked. I don't know, there's a red-hooded gang that's been provoking people recently. They're probably those bastards. They're the scum who hide their heads and show their tails. Oswald walked out with a fierce look on his face, and Niji suddenly stopped him. Wait, umbrella. Niji came over with the black umbrella that had been wiped clean and arranged, and handed it to Oswald. Safe travels. Oswald smiled knowingly, turned the umbrella in his hand and put it under his arm, then bowed like a gentleman. Gentlemen, I wish you a pleasant meal. After speaking, he turned around and left coolly. Meowmoo looked at his back, then turned to look at the bright night scene outside the window. Between the brightly lit high-rise buildings, there are the sounds of sirens, flashing red and blue police lights, and darkness that even light cannot penetrate. Episode 12. Emergency Situations. After a full meal, drinking is a pleasure, but when it comes to paying the bill, it's a pain in the ass. There are only a few bills left in the thick stack. Niji threw the remaining banknotes to Jerry and watched him happily receive them into his wallet. Otis next to him was holding a piece of honey cake and feeding Bastion, the big light brown mouse. It had just rained lightly outside, and the road was wet. The lights of passing vehicles were very beautiful on the ground. From the sewer on the roadside not far away, thick white-hot air was sprayed out. It was already a late autumn night and a gust of wind blew, making people feel a bit cold. Otis, get in the car and I'll take you back. Niji took out the police car keys from his arms and wanted to drive over. Otis, who was following behind, shook his head. Well, I won't go back now. I may be able to find some clues about the person that Mr. just mentioned. Huh? Niji turned around and looked over. Otis, who was holding the big mouse, had a happy smile on his face. In order to attend the dinner, he specially cut his hair into a neat buzz cut and fixed it with mousse like a brush. Niji, thank you. Thank you for not disliking me and treating me as a friend. I can also help you, so just let me go. Otis said seriously. Niji held the car keys and looked at him. The two looked at each other for a moment and finally smiled at each other. This is for you, be careful. Niji pulled out a Glock 17 from his waist and handed it to Otis. We are friends and will always be. Yeah. Otis held the pistol and nodded heavily. We're going back. Jerry opened the car door and waved to him. Niji sat in the driver's seat and started the police car, turned on the police lights, and the flashing red and blue police lights came on. Here, you are not used to using a revolver. Jerry smiled and handed his Glock 17 to Niji. Niji didn't refuse, he took it and put it on the holster on his waist, backed the police car out of the parking lot, honked the horn twice, and drove forward along the road. Otis, who was watching the police car go away, raised his hand and stroked Bastian's fur, then walked in the opposite direction with a smile. In a dark alley, a group of mice ran over carrying a handbag. Otis opened his handbag, changed out of his suit, carefully placed it in a moisture-proof bag, and took out the leather overalls, boots, and gloves that he wore in the water. There was also a portable lamp and a yellow gas mask on his head. Finally, he took out a bundle of rope and hung it on his belt. He opened the sewer cover on the ground and jumped down. In the dark sewer, Otis was holding a lantern, and dozens of rats gathered from all directions, gathering around him like a pilgrim. Go find that person. Otis raised his hand and waved, his voice a little dull while wearing a gas mask, but the rats ran out quickly. On the way back to Arkham District, Niji saw his colleagues driving police cars nearby at night. Police cars with their lights flashing were driving towards one place quickly. Just when Niji and the others were about to get on the main road, a shout came from the onboard obedient platform in the police car. Are you the police officers in that area? Please answer. A somewhat hoarse male voice sounded. His voice was very rough, as if his throat had been injured by shouting. Niji reached out and picked up the pager, looked ahead and shouted, We are police officers affiliated with the Arkham Police Department, and we are on our way back. I am James Gordon from the Gotham Police Department. I am temporarily calling your police car and go to 46th Street in Coventry immediately. Hurry. Platform communication hung up. Miyagi and Jerry looked at each other and quickly turned the steering wheel. The police car turned around on the road and drove along the main road towards Coventry District. There were particularly many police cars along the way. There was also a special operations team from the Gotham Police Department, driving a black anti-riot police car with sirens on, and caught up from behind. What's going on? Has Gotham turned upside down? Jerry became nervous when he saw this scene. There were more than a dozen police cars on the whole street with lights and sirens on. The scene was not ordinary and spectacular. Stop talking nonsense, something big is probably going to happen. Take out your guns. Damn, what's going on? Niji cursed and threw the enforcer revolver in his arms to Jerry. That guy didn't have the habit of carrying a spare gun. Quickly opening the safety and checking it, Jerry put the gun in his waistband and began to take off his clothes. They were still wearing suits for the hotel. In this situation, it would definitely be a bad situation not to wear police uniforms. Coventry is a relatively prosperous middle-class residential area. Because it is close to Robinson Park and Gotham University, it has convenient transportation and beautiful environment, making it an ideal place to live. But tonight, the peace here was broken by the piercing sound of police sirens. As soon as Niji and the others drove the police car to Avenue 46, they saw a bus rushing past. Chase. Don't let them escape. The bomb disposal team is here. An impatient voice sounded from the vehicle platform. Niji turned the steering wheel and rushed directly into the office building next to him. He took a shortcut from there and stepped on the accelerator. The police car was ejected and accelerated away as if it had been kicked. If Sheriff Mayid saw this scene, he would definitely want to take out his gun and kill the bastard Niji. In the bus that rushed out in front, a group of robbers wearing red hoods were having a carnival in the bus with wads of bills. Ouch! So much money, great! A member of the Red Hood grabbed a handful of green banknotes and threw them over his head. He was also wearing a series of necklaces and rings on all 10 fingers. Even the AK rifle in his hand was wrapped with a gold necklace, and the car was full of bags containing gold, silver, jewelry, and banknotes. Just 3 hours ago, they looted a middle-class community. Those who worked in large companies and were known as elite white-collar workers and gold-collar workers were tied up and took away all their property with sticks. The gold, silver, jewelry, and boxes full of banknotes in the car were just trivial. They took away tens of millions of assets in overseas bank accounts at once. Boss. There are police chasing you. A member wearing a red hood and jacket with the number 5 written in paint on his chest pointed at the back of the bus. More than a dozen police cars were in hot pursuit. The red-hooded boss, who was sitting on the bus chair and looking at the computer to transfer overseas account assets, turned his head and looked over, with the number 10 written on his chest. Through the red hood, the dazzling police lights on the back of the bus are still very clear. Get rid of them. Following the order, Red Hood number 3, who was driving in front, quickly accelerated. This bus was modified by them. Mumu, be careful. Jerry, who was on the passenger side of the police car, reached out to grab the steering wheel, raised his leg and stepped on the accelerator, shouting loudly to the side, be careful. Half of Niji's body was ejected from the car window. He was holding a Glock 17 with both hands, but the police car could still maintain a steady speed. Are you kidding, racing with the robbers? If he were the commander, he would directly activate the heavy firepower and learn from the Russian anti-terrorism experience. The bus was getting closer and closer, and there was a green belt in the middle. Meow Mook could see the figure in the window of the bus. The red hood is still made of reflective material, which is as conspicuous as a light bulb. Pull the trigger with your finger. Bang 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 bang. A bullet was fired from the muzzle of the Glock 17, and Niji's body shook due to the shock of the recoil. Jerry, who was in the car, reached out and grabbed his waistband to prevent him from falling out of the car. The people in the bus were miserable. Red Hood member number 7 was directly shot in the head and fell onto a bag of banknotes. The blood flowed on the green banknotes like a winding stream. Episode 13, Red Hood. The accelerating bus was very quiet, and the robbers wearing red hoods all squatted down. There were still 6 or 7 bullet holes in the glass on the right side of the bus. Red Hood number 7 lay motionless on the money bag. The smell of blood filled the air and stunned these bold robbers. The cheerful look just now was like a bucket of cold water being poured on them. How dare those useless Gotham police officers do this? Asshole. The member of the Red Hood, who wore a necklace around his neck, a ring on his hand, and the number 1 painted on his chest, stood up with an AK rifle in hand, pointed at the police car behind the window on the right, and pulled the trigger. Go to hell. The sudden gunfire covered up their inner fear, and the glass of the bus was shattered. As soon as Niji sat back in the driver's seat, the hood of the police car was hit by bullets several times. He was so frightened that he quickly slowed down and distanced himself. Even so, the windshield was hit by 2 bullets. Fuck. How cruel. Niji looked at the broken windshield, cursed with some fear, kicked the accelerator and rushed forward again. Jerry next to him had a frighteningly pale face and was still mumbling God's blessing. The bullet that had just penetrated the glass and flew over his head had almost killed him in the line of duty. Biba, a harsh sound of radio waves sounded from the carphone platform, and then a loud male voice came out. I am Faraz, captain of the Gotham Police Special Operations Team. Where are you from? Niji picked up the pager, looked at the bus turning sharply in front of him, and quickly turned the steering wheel to follow it. We are from the Arkham Police Department. I am Niji, and my partner Jerry Cabsun. We are following the bus, and they turned. Arkham? Niji? Faraz hesitated for a moment. Someone from the Arkham branch appeared here? And it was with such a strange name. But he reacted immediately and shouted in a commanding tone, don't let them escape, bite them hard, we will be there soon. The black explosion-proof car, driven by the Special Operations Team, could never increase its speed. I don't know if the driver couldn't step on the accelerator or if he didn't have a good pursuit mentality. I was thrown out by the bus for half a street, and even the taillights of the car were invisible at this turn. Niji thought for a moment and hung up the call, looking at the bus speeding ahead. Fortunately, there wasn't much traffic on the road here at night, so there was no accident. Otherwise it would be a disaster. Mumu, aren't you afraid? Jerry leaned on the passenger seat and held the enforcer revolver tightly. His nervousness had not yet eased. This was indeed too exciting for him. Jerry, people's fear comes from the unknown. Don't be afraid. There is nothing to be afraid of. We have to climb up. Just like the steak tonight, we can eat it every day in the future. If you are afraid, just think about what we ate in the Lower East Side. Do you still want to live that kind of life? I don't. What's more terrible than death is dying poor. I don't want to die in such a miserable way. I want to climb up. With the fire of ambition in his eyes, Niji stepped on the accelerator and accelerated again, directly cutting to the left side of the bus at the intersection ahead. Shit, damn it, fake squid. Jerry's timid heart disappeared without a trace when Niji said this. Asking him to go back and live a life in the slums was no different from making someone blind after seeing colors. Put down the window. Hit. Niji shouted sharply. Go to hell. Jerry gritted his teeth and punched it, smashing the window glass. He raised the revolver in his hand, pointed it at the bus glass above, and fired a burst of fire. Bang 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 bang. After 6 rounds, the revolver stopped firing. The Red Hood members on the bus also took this opportunity to stretch out the barrel of their gun from the shattered window and shoot. Niji released the accelerator and moved directly behind the bus. Looking at the situation of the bus, the police car slowed down again. Jerry, you drive. I'll do the driving. Niji gritted his teeth and shouted, stretched out his hand to pull down the driver's seat, and flipped it directly to the back seat. Jerry, who was loading the revolver, saw this scene and quickly rushed over to steady the steering wheel and put his foot on the accelerator. Meow Moo in the back seat opened the door, and the bus in front suddenly turned and headed west. Jerry also quickly turned the steering wheel. This sharp turn almost threw Niji out of the car. Mom, get out of here. Niji lay on the back seat and kicked the car door open, then kicked it down again. The door that fell off the police car flew straight out and fell to the ground, creating a series of sparks. Niji took a deep breath, reached out and grabbed the golden 6-pointed star hanging around his neck, and his vision widened in an instant. Jerry. Pass. Blow out their tires and step on the accelerator. It's time to fight. Niji shouted with a ferocious expression, and the Glock 17 in his hand was also replaced with an extended magazine carrying 19 rounds of ammunition. Ah 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 ah. Jerry also yelled angrily, turned the steering wheel fiercely, stepped on the accelerator to the bottom, and smoke started coming out of the hood in front. The police car's engine roared and roared, rushing directly to the left front of the bus. The red-hooded members on the bus also picked up their guns to intercept. Bang 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 bang. The gun in Niji's hand rang out, and it hit the bus window like water. The few Red Hood members who wanted to intercept were silenced by this burst of firepower. In just a few seconds, Niji pointed at the rear wheel of the bus and emptied the magazine, and the sound of gunfire continued. There was a muffled sound and the rear wheel exploded. The bus tilted, and the wheels rubbed against the ground causing sparks. The accelerating police car was also squeezed by the bus that tilted to the left and drove off the road. It's over, God. Jerry screamed, and the police car hit the guardrail and crashed into the water. This was the Gotham River. The police car was submerged in the water. Jerry struggled outwards and the door could not be pushed or opened. The seedlings behind him choked on the water. The bus on the road also stopped awkwardly, almost falling into the Gotham River together, and the door opened. Red Hood number 1 rushed down, holding an AK rifle, and fired a burst of fire at the quiet Gotham River. The bullets hit the water and caused a series of splashes. Okay. Let's retreat before those bastards catch up. Red Hood number 10 said in a deep voice, holding a laptop under his arm and looking at the Gotham River shrouded in darkness. I cursed in my heart, since when did Gotham have such desperate police officers? They really deserve to die. Ah. I'm hurt. There was a scream on the bus, and Red Hood number 3 sat on it with his hands on his thighs. He was hit by a ricochet, which was quite unlucky. Red Hood number 10 was silent for a moment and looked at the people around him. There were 8 of them in total. One of them was killed during the withdrawal, plus the one whose head was shot on the road. They still have 6 people, and now another one is injured. At this moment, the sound of a police car sounded on the road behind, which made them as nervous as frightened birds. Escape first. Let's go. Red Hood number 10 is about to run away with his notebook under his arm. Red Hood number 3 heard this in the bus and shouted quickly, "You can't leave me behind. Get rid of him." Red Hood number 10 ordered number 1, who was holding an AK rifle, and fled quickly with his men. Only Red Hood number 3 is left in the car, and Red Hood number 1 and Red Hood number 9 are under the car. Red Hood number 1 took out a magazine from the bulletproof vest stuffed with banknotes and put it on the AK rifle. He glanced at the river warily, but couldn't see anything in the pitch black. Got on the bus with an AK rifle. Episode 14, Shark Tooth Armor. The seedlings who fell into the water frowned as they were choked by the water. Jerry climbed out of the driver's seat and pushed him to the surface. Before they could take a breath, a series of bullets fell nearby. Fortunately, the place where they emerged from the water was far away, otherwise they would have been beaten into a sieve. Seedlings looked at the people standing on the shore, and quickly dragged Jerry, who was trying to struggle, into the water again. Ding! Encounter hidden treasures, discover obtainable items. Meowmoo, who had just dived into the water, almost choked again. There was something in the water. He pushed Jerry to the edge of the water and asked him to calm down. Niji observed the people on the shore, quietly took a deep breath, and plunged into the water. He felt in his heart that the thing was in the mud near the river beach. This feeling was very clear, exactly the same as when he found the Eye of True Seeing last time. Under the wide field of view of the Eye of True Sight, even the seedlings in the water can clearly see the things in the mud of the river beach. Approaching the place that was on his mind, Meowmoo reached out and dug in the mud. The breath he was holding was no longer enough. Niji reached in anxiously, but the soft mud didn't stop him much. He touched something hard like a stick. But there was no explanation like the Eye of True Seeing. I can't stay here any longer. Niji felt that he was almost suffocated. He gritted his teeth and pulled the hard object, and rushed toward the water surface. He stuck his head out of the water and took 2 deep breaths. Under the cover of the night, Meowji took a few breaths and realized that what he was holding was a bone arm with a black armor on it. Only the forearm part was like a metal sleeve. Niji stretched out his hand and pulled the gauntlet off the bone. As soon as he touched it, he knew what it was. Shark Tooth Gauntlet, metal armor. 3 sharp shark tooth blades can pop out from the gauntlet, unlimited. Jerry, who was floating in the water next to him, saw the seedlings and stepped on the water to get closer. Niji put on the gauntlet on his right hand and clenched his fist hard. From the raised gap on the side of the armor, 3 sharp blades with barbs popped out, like saws, and this thing was very strong, although it didn't feel heavy. Moo, what should I do? Jerry asked with a trembling voice. The water in the Gotham River was really cold at this time, so they had to be strong, otherwise they would really sink to the bottom of the river. Niji looked towards the bus. Why were there only 2 people there? Red Hood number 1 seemed to feel something. He turned his head and looked towards the river. After making sure there was nothing, he walked onto the bus with his AK rifle. 2 against 1. Kill him. Niji looked at Red Hood number 9 standing under the bus, holding an M16 automatic rifle in his hand, and dragged Jerry towards the shore. I still have this. There are a few bullets in it. Jerry pulled out the revolver from his pants and raised it out of the water. Water kept flowing out of the gun. It should be okay to shoot. 3, 2, 1. Niji leaned against the water and waved fiercely, pushing Jerry forward. Jerry, holding the gun in both hands, pulled the trigger with a ferocious expression. Click, click, 2 shots in a row were empty. Red Hood number 9, who was under the bus, also spotted Jerry in the water and raised the M16 rifle in his hand to shoot. Bang! The gun went off. Bang 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 bang. Gunshots also rang out in the bus. The gunfire from both sides overlapped. Jerry's revolver fired twice more, and Red Hood number 9 was hit by a bullet. It was like being hit by a hammer. 2 snowflakes exploded from his body and he fell backwards. He was hit by a gunshot and his nose was smashed. Suddenly I fell behind and sat under the bus. Jerry gasped and lay down on the shore. There was no bullet in the gun. It was really thrilling just now. Meowmoo swam over and climbed onto the river bank, rushing directly towards the bus. In the bus, Red Hood number 1, who had just helped Red Hood number 3 solve the pain, was packing the bags containing money and jewelry on the floor and planned to leave. The sound of thumping footsteps sounded from behind. Red Hood number 1 thought it was number 9 from outside who came in. He was about to turn around and ask for a few more bags of money. The rushing Niji raised his arm and punched Red Hood number 1 in the face, knocking him to the ground. Niji didn't pause for a moment. He raised his right arm and smashed it down like a hammer. The hard armor hit Red Hood number 1's head hard. The force was so heavy that stars appeared in his eyes. Ah. Niji raised his arm and smashed it down one by one, 7 times in a row. Then he grabbed Red Hood No. 1's collar, raised his arm and punched him in the face. He kept hitting him until his head was broken and bleeding, and he fainted. Without stopping, Niji held the 3 sharp blades on his fist and gauntlet and popped them out. Just when Red Hood No. 1 was about to be beheaded, Niji came back to his senses and suddenly hit the chair next to him. With a sudden thud, the chair was smashed. As Niji sat on the ground and gasped, the strength that had been mobilized by adrenaline suddenly dissipated. This night was a little too exciting. Moo? Jerry walked in with the M16 rifle he picked up from the corpse, holding the gun carefully. On the road outside, the roaring police car was already chasing me, and several searchlights shone on the bus. Niji sat slumped on the ground and looked at the gold and silver jewelry, necklaces, and rings on Red Hood No. 1. He quickly reached out and grabbed a handful and stuffed them into his pants. People inside, listen. You are surrounded. The members of the Gotham Special Operations team all wore black combat uniforms and body armor, holding MP5 tactical submachine guns in their arms, with tactical flashlights and flash suppressors in front. A series of footsteps sounded, and several flashlights illuminated the bus. Hands up. Get down on the ground. One of our own. Police. We are from Arkham. Jerry quickly threw away the rifle in his hand. If he was killed by one of his own people, he would be really wronged. Even so, he was held to the head with a gun. Niji, who was slumped on the ground, took this opportunity to grab another wad of bills and stuff them into his pants. Fortunately, when he changed into his suit, he wore long johns and socks so that his private parts wouldn't be exposed when he stood up. Under the bus, a burly man with a walkie-talkie in his hand was arranging for people to surround the place. Niji and the others were carried off the bus. Hello, I'm Froz, the captain of the Special Operations team. Can you tell me what's going on here? Froz saluted and looked at the wet seedlings and Jerry behind him. Hello. We are Niji from Arkham Police Department, Jerry Cabson. Niji stretched out his hand and gestured backwards. Jerry also nodded. Hello, Captain. Froz looked at Niji in surprise. Can you tell me what happened here? How did they die? We did it. Jerry shot this one to death. There was another person on the bus who was not dead. They killed each other and I knocked him unconscious in a sneak attack. You mean, you two not only caught up with them, but also forced them to stop, and even killed one of them? Froz felt like he had heard a fantasy, and it felt unreal. But what he said reminded Niji. Our car. Our police car was hit into the river when we were forcing the other party to stop. Niji rubbed his hands, hoping to get rid of this. Flass looked at the broken fence by the roadside and the car marks on the shore, and nodded. I understand. You are the heroes who saved this place, but you should deal with your situation first and change into clean clothes. We will record it for you later. Froz waved his hand and asked people to take Niji and the others back to change clothes, but the moment they left, the look on Froz's face turned into sarcasm and disdain. Hero? Are you worthy? Niji and the others didn't realize this. Niji was very willing to leave here. The things in his pants had to be moved quickly. Moreover, Niji reached out and touched the gauntlet on his right hand. The strong touch made an unconscious smile appear on his face. A police car drove over, and the car door opened and a man in a brown trench coat walked over in a hurry. He also wore a pair of glasses on his face and a mustache on his lips. Chief Gordon? Niji stopped and shouted. James Gordon heard someone calling him and stopped. Niji smiled and stretched out his hand to gesture to him. They were snatched away by the members of the Special Operations team behind them, and the two of them were put into a police car and driven to the nearest police station. Chief Gordon looked at their backs, shook his head in confusion, and walked towards the bus. Episode 15, Idle. In a blink of an eye, 3 days passed. Niji was lying on the bed wearing big underpants. The sunlight coming from behind the curtains shone on his feet that were tilted up and dangling. He was holding a Metropolitan newspaper in his hand. After the robbery, their police chief Maze's face was as black as the bottom of a pot, and he almost shot both of them with a gun. After finally making a fuss at the police station, the two of them were suspended for reflection. That robbery also set off huge amounts of public opinion in Gotham. After all, the elites lived there. They were robbed by the robbers and had a time bomb planted with their lives hanging by a thread. The mayor was so scolded by the media that he took a sick leave, and the Gotham police were also scolded as trash, even though they were trash in the first place. The only one who was captured, Red Hood No. 1, as well as several robbers who were shot dead, and the intercepted bus became the military medals of the Gotham Police Department. Froz, the captain of the Special Operations Team, also accepted an interview with reporters. The retired Special Forces soldier who talked freely on TV made Niji and the others very unhappy, but there was nothing they could do about it. The credit must be divided. They are just ordinary first-level police officers of the Arkham Division, but I didn't expect that it really has nothing to do with them. Originally, Niji was still thinking that no matter how corrupt they were, they would have to be promoted to a higher position. The sergeant did not dare to think that it would be no problem to become a second-level police officer or a third-level police detective. The result was nothing, and the debt for the destruction of the police car was added to them. The character of those bastards was overestimated. It was only Niji who stuffed something into his pants when he arrived, otherwise he would have suffered a huge loss. The door was pushed open, and a shirtless Jerry, wiping his head with a towel, walked in from the outside. He stood in front of the mirror on the wall, humming a tune and shaving his face with a razor. The place they live in has no bathroom, no high-end kitchen, and only one bedroom, nothing else. Pushing the door in, there is a window in front, a table under the window, 2 single beds on the left and right of the table, and 2 police uniforms and some wrinkled suits hanging on the wall. Niji lay on the bed and put down the newspaper, raised his head and glanced behind him. Is there still water in the bathroom? It's hot. No, the cold shower I took was so cold. Jerry shaved his face and said that the apartment building they lived in was a slum apartment built by Italians. There was only one bathroom on each floor, no toilet, no kitchen, and everyone had to compete for hot water for bathing. The old Italian man would often come over to check on me. If he used more hot water, he would scold me. If it weren't for the fact that his rent was cheap and could be extended, he would have been beaten to death. Boring. Niji lay on the pillow, reading the newspaper of Metropolis. Yes. There is the Metropolis where Superman protects. This Daily Planet is where Superman Clark works, and Niji also saw the small section written by Superman about environmental protection and peace. The tofu block at the end of the 5th edition, which would have been indistinguishable if it weren't for the signature, is the headline, Lutu was defeated by Superman again. To be precise, it should be that he was defeated again, but Niji saw a little opportunity, an opportunity to make money. Opportunities for police to illegally speculate in stocks. Lex Luthor, a bald man who claims to have 9 levels of wisdom, Superman's old enemy, and the rich and powerful chairman of the Lex Group. Lex Group is even more powerful than Wayne Group in some super technical aspects, but he chose to fight Superman to the death. Niji lay on the pillow, reached for the revolver next to him and checked the magazine. 6 rounds were fully loaded. The Glock pistol sank in the river along with the police car. Niji took a revolver and aimed it at the torn curtain hanging on the window. Stock trading is risky. But as the saying goes, the bigger the storm, the more expensive the fish. Whether it is the current Wayne Group or the Wayne Group that will develop in the fields of environmental protection and people's livelihood in the future, they are both Jinduobeo that makes money, and there is no future in speculation. But Luthor is different. After he was defeated by Superman and thrown into prison, the stock price of Lex Group fell. When he came out and came up with new inventions, it skyrocketed. After this surge, there will be a PK between him and Superman. It's not easy for investors. If you pay him money, you can watch Superman tear apart mechas and dismantle Gundams, and watch the fireworks at the same time. Mumu, I'm going down to eat, are you going? After shaving, Jerry combed his hair with a comb, and hung a gold necklace as thick as a finger around his neck, dressing up as if he was going on a date. Eat? Bring me a burrito. I want beef. I'll also bring 2 fried chicken legs, 2 rice balls, and a bottle of beer. Lying on the bed, Niji said that there is a Mexican restaurant downstairs. The name is Mexican Restaurant, but because the crowd here is different, all kinds of food are available, just like a fast food restaurant. Okay. Jerry smiled in the mirror, put on his shirt, jacket, shoes, and ran out. The door was not even closed, and Niji smiled helplessly. During the recent days of rest, the twin daughters of the owner of the Mexican restaurant below have been having a heated fight with Jerry. In the past, I had neither money nor time, and I was still working as a precarious intern. It's different now. Now that I have a job and money, it's much easier to flirt with girls. Niji yawned, raised his arms and rolled up his sleeves, and wiped the shark tooth gauntlet on his right arm clean. It clings to the arm like a rubber sleeve, with fine silver-white triangular lines on it, and a raised gap on the side. Niji waved his hand and struck, and 3 curved blades instantly popped out from the arm armor. They smashed hard and then sliced open, killing half of his life. Squeak! There was a sound at the door. Niji held the pistol and turned around to look. A big light brown mouse was standing at the door, raising his head and sniffing the smell in the air. "This is Bastion?" Niji shouted with some surprise. "This is the mouse next to Otis. His name is Bastion. It is also the partner who accompanied Otis in Blackgate Prison for 10 years. When Bastion heard Niji's voice, a smile appeared on his face, and he hurried in. There were several pairs of worn shoes, newspapers, beer bottles, and so on thrown on the ground. 2 bachelors' bedrooms are good enough for people to live in them. Squeak, squeak. Busties pulled a paper roll from his tail. "Did Otis ask you to come?" Niji reached out and took the scroll, opened it and read it. There was only a very brief sentence on it: a body was found. "See you at the sewage plant." "Corpse?" Niji looked at the note and then at Bastion. He quickly reached for a pair of pants and put them on. The revolver and handcuffs were all hung on his belt. During the suspension period, the police card was kept at the police station. Grabbing the police uniform jacket and putting it on, Niji reached out to Busties. TSK, come here, let's go find Otis." Bastion grabbed Niji's arm and skillfully jumped into his coat pocket. The heavy weight pulled the coat askew. "You have to let Otis help you lose weight." Niji took out his sunglasses and put them on his face, put on his leather shoes and walked outside, closing the door. The place they lived in was on the 6th floor. There was no elevator and they had to walk down the stairs, so Niji didn't bother to go down. When you are full, bring the food up and your digestion will be almost complete. Mexican restaurant downstairs. Niji originally wanted to ask Jerry to come with him, but she saw him sitting at a small round table in the restaurant, holding a cup of coffee. The 2 Mexican girls, who looked almost the same and had fluffy curly hair but wore aprons of 2 different colors, were laughing there and telling cute little jokes. Why didn't I realize he was so good at talking before? Niji shook his head and did not disturb his little date. He walked toward the sewage treatment plant with Bastion in his pocket. Episode 16, Stitching the Corpse. As soon as Niji arrived at the sewage treatment plant, Bastion jumped out of his pocket, landed on the ground and ran towards the sewer. Niji followed and scanned the surroundings. He saw fewer homeless people before, but now there are some new faces. The homeless men looked at the black police uniform on Niji and shrank in fear in the shadow of the iron frame. Came back. Otis, who was sitting in the sewer, looked at Busties running over, smiled and touched its hair. "What body was found?" Niji came over and asked. Seeing the seedlings, Otis stood up quickly, pointed into the sewer and said, "I found it on the filter screen of the 2nd floor sewer." It took a while to get him up. Niji looked at Otis's haggard expression, patted him on the shoulder, nodded and said, "Thank you for your hard work. It's okay. By the way, I'll give you the gun back. I met something running very fast on the road and used a few bullets." Otis hurriedly handed the Glock 17 pistol to Niji, who waved his hand. "No, this gun is for you for self-defense. By the way, what did you encounter?" Niji asked curiously, glancing at Otis's shoulder, which was still wrapped with a bandage. "I don't know. It wasn't a mouse anyway. It moved very quickly like a ball and scratched me." Otis recalled the thing he met in the sewer, shook his head, and put away the Glock pistol. "By the way, I went to the police station and couldn't find you, so I asked Bastion to look for you." "Did something happen to you?" "Haha, it's nothing. I just let people deceive me for a while and then take it back. I'm not that big-hearted." Niji smiled and replied without explaining, and walked towards the sewer, with Otis following behind. There is a special smell floating in the sewer. It is not the smell of sewage, but the smell of rot. Not far away, Niji saw the corpse Otis was talking about. There was a portable lamp hanging next to it. Under the light, the corpse looked very huge, like a mountain of meat. Just one glance at Niji made his stomach churn, but unfortunately there was nothing in his stomach that he couldn't vomit out. The corpse soaked in the water turned white and swollen, and it looked like a giant. Moreover, the corpse hit the filter screen of the sewer, and the soaked skin and flesh were cut into pieces by the filter screen, like tofu. There was also a rotten smell, which was very pungent. Niji raised his hands to cover his nose and mouth, frowning and looking at the pieced-together body. Yes. It was pieced together. There were 4 hands and 3 legs on the corpse, and several pieces of skin were sewn on the swollen and deformed face, just like several people's faces were sewn onto one person's face. The stitched areas on the body were tightly pinched and due to the swelling of the flesh, just like a patched-up rag doll. Abnormal, Niji said with a frown. The murderer has not been found. There are many places in the sewers that even rats dare not go to, but it should be in the Arkham area. I found some things. Look. Otis walked to the wall and picked up a bag from the shadows, put it in front of a portable lamp and opened it. Inside was a pile of saws, drill bits, and wire for sewing. Without exception, there were traces of dried blood on them. Seedlings looked at the things inside, bent down and picked up a small stainless steel handsaw, which was used to cut bones. After thinking for a moment, Meowmoo casually threw the saw in. Call the police and leave the body to the police for disposal. Ah. Otis looked at Niji in surprise, as if he was asking why you called the police if you were a policeman. I was suspended from my job and just called the police to have others investigate. Niji clapped his hands and said, looking outside the sewer, the only light in the dark sewer, and asked curiously, I see a lot more homeless people outside. Indeed, I gave them some money before. Everyone became homeless because of some things. After having money, many people went back, but... Otis smiled bitterly, there are still many people who are homeless and can only stay here. Niji nodded silently, turned to look at Otis, and asked, what about you? Do you have any ideas? Otis shook his head. He came out of Blackgate prison unclear about everything, and had no goals or directions. If he hadn't met Niji, he would have collapsed long ago. It's better to teach people how to fish than to teach them how to fish. If you give them money, it's better to take them to work together so that they can survive here relying on their own ability. Otis looked at Niji, a little confused as to what he meant, but he believed what Niji said. Niji smiled and said, let's go, let's call the police first. Click. Click. 2 police officers were holding cameras and taking pictures of the sutured corpse. The police dispatched to Arkham District very quickly. Came in less than 10 minutes. However, after seeing the caller, Ma-Ease, who was in charge of dispatching the police, turned as black and smelly as a donkey's face, but he did not say anything bad to Niji and the others. About the Red Hood robbery that took place in the costly district, some gossips also spread among the police circles, and Maze also had a general idea. A police car in Arkham District that was riddled with bullet holes was also fished out of the Gotham River. Although the rumors were somewhat false, Maze no longer wanted to curse. As for the 2 men who chased the Red Hood gang, they also stopped the other party's bus, shot 2 of them to death and captured 1 alive. This kind of joke is really not funny. How was the body discovered? Maze pinched his nose, stood beside the car, and glanced at the body over there from a distance. The 2 police officers who took the photo were already vomiting. Looking at them, they might have nightmares at night. Niji stood beside him with his arms folded, and said casually, the local homeless man called the police, and he rushed up from the sewer. Mais frowned and looked at Niji sideways, why are you here? I was suspended from my job, and I was chatting with my friends here, and I found out. What happened? Do you suspect that I did it? Niji asked, tilting his head. No. Maze said with a dark face. What should I do with the body? Should I call the forensic doctor to check it out? Niji continued to ask. Maze looked at Niji as if he were an idiot. Forensic doctor? Do they have such a thing in the Arkham branch? And is this monster human? But after thinking about it, Mais opened the door of the police car and got in, lowered the window and waved to Niji. Niji turned around and looked around, as if it was not him that Mais was greeting. The corners of Maze's eyes twitched, and he gritted his teeth and said, come here. It's you who is calling. Mr. Police Officer, what do you want to see me for? I am just an ordinary citizen during my suspension. Niji came over and teased with a slight smile. Maze stared at him and pointed at the body pulled out of the sewer. You are now suspended from duty and are responsible for keeping an eye on this body here. I will report to the director. If appropriate, a car will come over later. Take the body away. Sorry, I refuse. The smile on Niji's face disappeared and he said with a cold expression. Why? Mais asked puzzled. The person who took out this corpse is in our Arkham area. Maybe someone will come over later to kill and silence him. Look at me, look at them, it might end up like this. As Niji spoke, he pointed at himself and the 2 police officers who were vomiting at the water pipe, but what he said sent a chill down Maze's back. I don't want to face such a lunatic who chops off his hands and feet and sews them together like a rag doll. He will die. Niji shouted in surprise, frightening Maze. What do you want? Episode 17, The Riddler. Sirens sounded at the sewage plant. 3 police cars drove over, 2 of them came from the Gotham Police Department, and 1 came from the Arkham Precinct. Moo moo. Jerry, who put on his police uniform and took back his police badge, got out of the car happily and ran towards this side. Niji sat under the shed and waved to him. Your little date blew up again. Jerry smiled and waved his hand. No problem, where is the body? As he said that, he looked around. I built a shed in the back because I was afraid of the smell. Niji pointed behind him. In a shed held up by plastic sheeting, a black plastic bag wrapped the body and placed it on the ground. There was also a faint smell of putrefaction surrounding it. A lot of people got out of the 2 police cars from the Gotham Police Department. The leader was a sloppy-looking man with a big belly and stubble all over his face. He walked over and took out his police ID card and gestured. I am the captain of the Gotham Police Department, Harvey Bullock. Which of you is in charge here? Hello, I am Officer Niji of the Arkham Police Department, and I have been ordered to guard the scene here. Niji raised his hand and saluted. Niji? Are you Chinese? Bullock raised his eyebrows. Yes. Niji nodded. The dumplings in Chinatown are delicious, I like them very much. Bullock raised his thumbs and smiled, relaxing the atmosphere at the scene. Okay, where is the body? Niji quickly got out of the way, and the 2 police officers who had been thrown here by Chief Maiz opened the black plastic bag on the body with a grimace. Because the weather is very good today, it is one of the few days in Gotham where you can see the sun, and the temperature is also relatively high. The black plastic bag covering the body was stuck to it. When you lift it up, you can feel the sticky state, like oil from the sun, or something that has deteriorated. As soon as the black plastic bag was opened, the disgusting smell came directly to his nose. Sheriff Bullock quickly covered his nose, even though the odor of tobacco, alcohol, and sweat on his body was stronger than the stench of corpses. Niji had already prepared to block his nose with paper. Jerry, who was unprepared, spurted it out of his mouth, covered his mouth and ran to the side, bending over and vomiting. He ate a lot at noon today. Oh. Shit, he is indeed such a pervert. Bullock glanced at the body and raised his hand to rub his forehead. The surrounding police officers all had painful expressions on their faces, especially Jerry, who was vomiting and was constantly challenging their nerves. They just regretted eating too much at noon today. I cannot make it. A police officer held the vomit that was about to spurt out, turned around and ran out, vomiting together with Jerry. Everyone else also took a few steps back and stopped looking here. Well, your tolerance is really strong. I almost want to vomit. It's so disgusting. Brock said, looking at Niji, who looked calm. No, I can't spit it out. I didn't eat today. Niji put his hands in his pockets and shook his head. There was a ball of paper in his nose and he spoke in a low voice. Okay, so who, the forensic doctor, comes over to check? Bullock turned around and shouted to the back. He also took a few steps back, left the shed supported by plastic sheets, took out the cigarette case from his pocket, and started to light a cigarette. Chief Bullock, my name is Edward Nigma, not that one. A tall and thin young man walked towards us carrying a suitcase. He was wearing a crisp suit, his hair was meticulously combed, and he also wore a pair of gold-rimmed glasses. But when he looked at Bullock, he showed some helplessness, and Bullock nodded perfunctorily, indicating that he understood. Edward Nigma? This name sounds familiar. Niji said with some curiosity, this name is definitely familiar, and there is an even more familiar name, the Riddler. Sound familiar? Nigma turned his head and looked over, tilted his head with a slight smile and said, what is yours, but others use it more than you. Riddle? Niji asked softly. Nigma nodded. He liked to see other people being tortured by riddles but finding it hard to get close. What is something that belongs to you, but someone else uses it more than you do? Niji muttered to himself and repeated it, lost in thought. He didn't understand the riddle. But the Riddler, he understands. This guy's riddles all have a fixed routine, which is what he wants to say, or a reminder. What they just said was, I remembered. The answer is name. I don't call it much, others call it the most. Nigma's eyes lit up and he nodded, yes, I didn't expect you to have a talent for guessing riddles. Okay, let's chat later, work, if you don't do it, it will stink. Bullock said repeatedly while holding a cigarette in his mouth. Nigma shrugged helplessly, and could only put down the idea of discussing the riddle with Niji, and walked towards the body with the box in hand. Seeing this, Niji quickly followed. "Mr. Nigma, do you need help?" "No, I can do it myself, it's okay," Nigma said with a smile, opening the suitcase he was carrying, and inside were the instruments for autopsy. He picked up a pair of gloves and a mask and put it on his face, put on a white coat and walked to the body. His calm expression was not affected at all, and his psychological quality was second to none. "Mr. Nigma, are you a forensic doctor?" Niji took a pair of gloves and put them on, and pulled a mask over his face to get the paper ball out of his nose. "No need to call me sir, I'm not a forensic scientist, I'm just part-time. I work in the police station's logistics, as a manager." When Nigma said this, he even smiled. "I picked up the tweezers and inspected the skin of the corpse. As soon as the tips of the tweezers clamped the skin, it suddenly burst. A thick, pus-like fluid leaked out of it." Niji also felt a little nauseous, but he couldn't leave, so he simply squatted next to the box and helped Nigma pass the things. The environment here was poor, and the body was decomposing faster than expected. Nigma directly picked up the dissection knife and cut it up like a pig butcher. Jerry and the others, who had already recovered, were even more horrified when they saw this scene. The other police officers who had not vomited also vomited. Some of the more curious homeless people came over to take a look, and after just one glance, they screamed in fright and ran away. Even Bullock didn't want to look over there. Edward Nigma wasn't very skilled, but he just didn't have a very good mind. Otherwise, in the field of autopsy, we can get rid of those bar-starred idiots who don't eat corpses. What a shame, so unflattering. Watching the dissected seedlings up close, I felt as regretful as if I had eaten 10 pounds of bitter melon. The key was that I couldn't run, my legs were numb. The corpse was simply cut into pieces in Nigma's hands. The rotten internal organs were chopped into pieces by him, the bones were cut off with pliers, and every inch of muscle was cut. The smell of decaying corpses. Niji couldn't feel his nose anymore. It was malfunctioning and he couldn't smell anything. When Nigma opened the corpse's skull with a hacksaw, the pus-like brain material came out and dripped onto the plastic bags laid underneath. It was really numbing. When the body was pulled out of the sewer, it could no longer be lifted, so it had to be dissected on the spot, but I didn't expect it to be so terrible. Episode 18, Puppet Master. The Riddler, Edward Nigma, is one of Gotham's supervillains. He does not have any super abilities, but only the crimes he uses his high IQ to commit, and the key riddles. He has deduced Batman's true identity, deceived Catwoman, and ruled Gotham, a high-level achievement, although it was only for a limited time. But now, he is just a depressed clerk, and very annoying. At least no one will thank him today. Niji knew this very well. After all, after finishing the dissection, Nigma took Niji and mocked everyone. At that moment, Niji was so embarrassed that he felt like someone else's child. Everyone was embarrassed, especially since he had to take the chopped body back. Some things can be said, and some things cannot be said. Everyone understands this. But Nigma felt like he was missing a string in his head, perhaps because he despised those people in his heart, treating them like trash. He doesn't bother to join in the same trend with them, let alone have a good relationship with them. Except for himself, who is a genius, everyone else is trash in his eyes. At most, the difference between big trash and little trash. A simple description is that his heart is as high as the sky, and no one is worthy of competing with him. He is the aloof one. This is the case we are investigating, codename, Puppet Master. The Arkham Police Station conference room was dark, with only the blue light of the projector projecting photos on the wall. Director Wei Fei, who was sitting in the upper seat, raised his hand to cover his mouth with a cold expression. If you turned on the light, you would find that his face was as white as snow, and his throat was choked and he was about to vomit. The photos on the projector showed deformed stitched monsters that could no longer be called human beings. The hands turned into feet, the legs were transplanted to the belly, the skin was removed from the face and resewed, and the two people were pieced together into one person. They were sewn together like toy dolls, but without exception, they were all corpses, and the slides flashed one by one. Many police officers with poor psychological abilities in the conference room ran out in the dark, rushed into the toilet and vomited. The faces of Niji and the others standing in the back didn't look very good, just like watching a horror movie, but what happened during the day raised their threshold. Looking at it now, it's just like this. This is the situation. This criminal has committed 11 consecutive crimes. Decedent has been able to confirm that there are 19 people. The policeman standing by the wall with a baton in his hand said. The slide changed again, it was a map of Gotham. We have checked many places and narrowed the scope a lot. Now we can basically confirm that he is here. The black baton hit a triangular area on the map, and Director Wei Fei's face became even worse. That's where Arkham District is, and it's the most chaotic place in Gotham. I wonder what Chief Weaver has to say. Bullock took out a Camel cigarette and knocked it on the conference table. Ever since the projector light came on, he hasn't stopped smoking, and he has taken out all the cigarette butts in the ashtray. No, we will cooperate, fully cooperate. Wei Fei quickly said that knowing that there was such a pervert in his jurisdiction, he couldn't sleep well at night. Maybe it was time to consider moving to a safer place. Last time my home was evacuated without anyone noticing, and now I encountered this pervert again. Ahem, let me say a few words. Bullock stood up, picked up the lighter and lit the cigarette, and glanced around the room. There were not many people left. This time the Gotham Police Department will go all out. Originally, Chief James Gordon was in charge of this case, but because of the Red Hood robbery, he was temporarily unable to get involved, so I took charge. I only have one request. Let this perverted bastard be completely finished. Bullock clenched his fist and slammed it on the conference table. His cold eyes were much stronger than his sloppy appearance. Well, I have a problem. Niji raised his hand and said, although the code name is Puppet Master, do we have information about the other party or specific information? No. Bullock said it very directly and to the point, as if he had said a very remarkable thing. I have only taken over this case for a few days, and I don't know the specifics, but some information will be sent tonight. Bullock turned to Director Weaver and said, we need to set up a command center here, and we also need manpower to help. I hope to get your support. No problem, you choose whatever you want. Wei Fei agreed immediately. As long as he was not chosen, anything would be fine. As for merit. As long as the case is solved in Arkham District, he will definitely be on the credit list. Even if it is not solved, his hard work is still there. That's good. Bullock turned to look at the conference room. There were not many people there, and there were still some people who were holding on. Those people, please come with me and form an office first. Bullock pointed at Niji and the others. After all, among a group of people who were trying not to vomit, a few guys with normal faces and no fear stood out. The light bulbs came on and the conference room door opened. Meowmoo and the others walked out. Jerry covered his stomach and smacked his lips. Moo, I'm hungry. As soon as he mentioned eating, the expressions of several other people suddenly changed, and that disgusting feeling came back. Mr. Nigma, do you want to go to dinner together? I know a good Mexican restaurant. Niji ran a few steps forward, followed up with Nigma in front, and extended a warm invitation. Nigma was a little surprised because few people invited him to dinner, so he stopped and thought about it. What should a three-legged cow be called? Nigma told another riddle and looked at Niji expectantly. It was obvious that if the answer was correct, they could go to dinner together. Cow? Let's have a steak. Eat one of its legs. Meowmoo grinned and said boldly, Liu Bei would have paid 3 visits to the thatched cottage if he could capture the Riddler. Not to mention cows, even if they wanted to eat mermaids, Meowmoo also went to Adam's Port to find a boat to catch one. There are very few people in Gotham who can rely on their IQ to compete with Batman. If they miss it, Niji can give himself a slap in the face first. Interesting, I told you first, if the steak is not delicious, I will flip the table. Nigma smiled and raised his hand to push up his glasses. If the steak is not delicious, I will definitely take the first step and turn the table over. I will never let you down. The smile on Niji's face became even stronger, and she turned to Jerry and the others and shouted, let's go together, I'm treating you. Except for Jerry, everyone else looked at each other, obviously hesitant. After all, they knew exactly what these two people did during the day, but with Bullock's words, everyone went. If you want to eat, would you mind taking me with you? Bullock, with a cigarette in his mouth and a bulging belly, walked out of the conference room and surrounded everyone to go to dinner with Niji. Episode 19, Mexican Restaurant. Mexican Restaurant. Just downstairs from the apartment where Niji and the others live, the restaurant is very large and is a family business owned by the Carmen family. The current store owner, Pamela Carmen, and his wife have 6 sons and 3 daughters, and they run the store together as a family. As soon as you enter the store, you can see a super long bar inside. Behind the bar are the kitchen, fried chicken shop, bar, bakery, cold drink shop, and sushi shop. All kinds of food are laid out like a buffet restaurant. There are more than 30 small round tables in the store, which can seat 4 people. In the evening, this place also works as a bar, allowing some drunkards to get drunk here, but today there are much fewer people here. The main thing is that a group of policemen in police uniforms eat here, and the effect is more immediate than spraying disinfectant powder. The owner of the restaurant, Pamela, is over 50 years old, her hair is already gray, and she is wearing an apron and frying steaks next to the stove. His sons and daughters-in-law were preparing other food. There were more than 10 police officers who came, and their tastes were all different, so the whole family was busy. Except at the bar counter, Gia was holding a large glass of beer and vividly describing what happened today to the restaurant owner's 2 twin daughters. The surprising and strange case made the 2 women tremble and almost scream in fear. Because there were not many people in the restaurant, the policemen sat casually. Niji and Nimeg sat at the same table. Sheriff Bullock sat at the table by himself, holding a glass of whiskey in his hand, and a cigarette butt was thrown into the ashtray on the table. Okay, here comes the steak. Pemra Carmen walked out of the bar carrying 2 steaks, put the plates on the table, and stood with a smile on her face, waiting for comments. Just now Niji asked Jerry to tell him that if the steak was not cooked well, he would destroy his shop. The knife and fork cut the steak on the dinner plate. Nigma took a bite and nodded, the taste is okay. If the heat is more stable, the taste will be better. The meat quality is slightly worse, 63 points. Ah. Pamela was a little confused and didn't know what it meant. Niji waved his hand, bring me a bottle of good wine. I remember that you seem to have the red wine for the 50th anniversary of Wayne Manor. I bought it. Ah. The confusion on Pamela's face turned into surprise. That was the treasure of his store, a red wine specially released by the Wayne family Red Wine Manor 50 years ago. The starting price is $10,000, and now it's even more. Niji winked at him, Pamela was a little embarrassed, and Nigma was even more surprised. This treatment was a bit high. Well, just ordinary red wine. Niji stared at Pamela and said in a deep voice, I will give you 3 times the price. In total, I owe you a favor. Okay. Pemra gritted her teeth and agreed. Mainly because Niji said he owed him a favor, not to mention whether it was money or not. These policemen were all invited by him. If he didn't give him face, his store would be really doomed. Pamela ran towards the bar, and Nigma said a little embarrassedly, there's really no need. Niji raised his hand to interrupt him, Edward, that's what I call you. I won't miss anything if I treat you to dinner, otherwise it would be disrespectful. I like talented people, but you are different. You are a genius. This. Nigma laughed. Everyone is willing to listen to good things, especially a person like him who is proud but cannot be recognized. If you consider me a friend, don't refuse. You are an extraordinary person, aren't you? Niji laughed. Nigma also laughed and looked at Niji with a much more pleasing look. Yes, he is an extraordinary person. Finally, someone saw it and recognized him. It's Wayne Manor's 50th anniversary. Pamela came over with a bottle of wine wrapped in thick yellow paper, and also brought over a decanter and a red wine glass. The surrounding police officers also craned their necks and looked over curiously, wanting to see what the 50th anniversary of Wayne Manor looked like. Nigma felt these views, and proudly pushed his chest forward to make himself sit more politely. Perhaps this is the first time in his life that he has attracted so much attention. Pamela opened the red wine with a corkscrew. The red wine, which was as rich as blood and had a faint fragrance, was poured into the decanter. Niji looked at the red wine with mixed feelings in her heart. What she was drinking was not wine, but money. Real money. But, it's worth it. If you want to do it, do what others can't do. It's Nyang Shipi's fault. Niji really doesn't believe that anyone can be as willing as herself. Money is something external to the body, spend it and earn it again. Niji comforted himself in his heart. Holding the red wine, Nigma looked at the red wine liquid in the cup, which looked like a cup of rich blood, and said with some emotion, the less you have, the more precious it is. Nigma picked up the wine glass, gestured to Niji, and clinked the 2 wine glasses, to my friend. To my friend. Niji also said with a smile. I originally wanted to drink the glass of wine, but when I thought that this was my year's salary, my actions suddenly became more elegant. Sheriff Bullock, who watched from beginning to end, shook his wine glass and stared at Niji. He remembered one thing. During the Red Hood robbery, an Arkham police car chased him, and he happened to be on vacation at that time, and he had just come back. But I have seen that police car with more than 30 bullet holes in it and a door missing, which is enough to see the intensity of the time, which is not what those weaklings and trash can do. As for Flass from the Special Ops team, Brock curled his lips in disdain, but he also glanced at Niji and had a little more expectations. The wine has passed 3 rounds, and the food has passed the 5 flavors. The relationship between Nigma and Niji was also brought closer by this glass of wine, and they became friends who talked about everything. Edward, what kind of person is the puppet master you said we want to investigate? Niji asked while holding a fork and chewing steak. He really didn't know about this. After all, Professor Pig Noodles is the most famous person for human body suturing. Who is this puppet master? I only vaguely knew that there was such a villain, but I couldn't tell him anything specific. Doctor. Surgeon, and the kind with good skills. Nigma slowly swayed the wine glass. His glasses had been taken off, his face was a little drunk, but his voice was very sober. Let me tell you, your guess is definitely this. Niji stretched out his thumb and gestured, making Nigma laugh. Do you remember that corpse? Although the suture scars on it were sutured with metal threads, they were definitely sutured by a doctor. They were so neat that they couldn't be produced after just a few years of practice. As Nigma spoke, he drew on the table with his fingers, those trash in the police station. They only saw the deformation of the corpses, but did not realize that these corpses were being perfected. Each one was more complete than the last. Like. Niji took over and said, it's like upgrading. The puppet master is practicing to make better things. Nigma clapped his hands and said with a smile, you are 100 times better than those trash in the police station, just a little worse than me. No, you are a genius that I can't catch. Ha 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 ha. Nigma laughed. But the faces of the policemen around them were getting worse and worse. This piece of trash, that piece of trash, it was really disturbing. That guy wanted to make something very powerful, and he was almost finished. This body was drowned alive. His spine was broken, and he fell into the water and drowned. Moreover, Nigma's face suddenly became serious. The spine of this corpse was broken by someone. Episode 20, Friends, Broken Spine? As soon as this topic came up, Niji thought of a person in his mind, Bane, a mercenary with high IQ and high strength, and one of Gotham's supervillains. That guy's peak achievement was to break Batman's spine, and he almost retired Batman. But Nigma's next words made Niji give up this idea, because it was a hammer that broke the corpse's spine. The two chatted until the evening, and Bullock and the others had already paid and left. It was obvious that Nigma's contemptuous tone made these colleagues very uncomfortable. He didn't even call him when he left, but this suited Niji's wishes. He got another police car from Sheriff Maes, just in time to send Nigma back. Jerry, give me the car keys. You go back later. I'll come back later to pay the bill. Niji walked over and got the keys from Jerry. The guy was still chatting with the two girls. He probably doesn't even know how much they spent here tonight. If he knew, he would definitely find a way to avoid the bill. Edward, let me take you back. Taxis in Arkham are not easy to take. Niji came over and said with the key. Edward Nigma picked up the glasses on the table and put them on. Seeing Niji's enthusiastic look, he felt a little embarrassed. This is troubling you. It's my honor to be with an elite like you. This way. Niji gestured with his hand. Although Nigma is a bit arrogant and has a bad mouth, he really doesn't drink well. He was already a little drunk after less than 3 glasses of red wine. Niji helped Nigma out of the Mexican restaurant, took the car keys to open the door of a police car parked on the roadside, and then helped him get into the car. Nigma, who was sitting in the passenger seat, raised his hands to rub his face, while Niji sat in the driver's seat and started the engine. Edward, where do you live? Niji asked while turning the steering wheel to make a U-turn. The street here is very narrow, and 2 cars traveling side by side cannot pass. The car lights in front were illuminating the darkness on the road. Nigma leaned against the window and slowly lowered the window to let in the night breeze. Slowly exhaling the breath of alcohol, Nigma looked at the approaching steel bridge and smiled drunkenly. A diamond plate, a glowing fireplace, a place you never leave. Where am I? Go home. Niji answered the question without thinking. Nothing is more reassuring than home. Ha 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 ha. Nigma took off his glasses and laughed very happily. You actually know. You are the first person I have met who doesn't hate riddles. Those losers always blame me when they can't find the answer, instead of thinking that it's because they are too stupid. Hearing this, Miyagi chuckled and said, geniuses are not understood by others. If everyone can understand you, are you still a genius? Those ordinary people will not understand you. Genius, haha, you're right. Nigma held the gold-rimmed glasses in his hand and looked at the surface of the Gotham River. The quiet waves flashed past the car window. Niji, thank you. This is the first time I have met an interesting person like you. You know, I didn't have many friends before. Then you now have our genius, Mr. Edward Nigma, and your friend Niji will be honored to send you home. Niji imitated the accent of the TV host and read aloud with a bit of tenor, which made Nigma laugh again. Number 32, Lower East Side, Sfid apartment building. Just send me there. I live at number 32 on the 4th floor. Okay. Niji immediately turned on his police lights, and the red and blue police lights flashed on the roof of the car. As soon as he drove into the Lower East Side, many people were frightened and ran away. The Sphere Apartments is an old Gothic apartment building, which is very common in the Lower East Side, with a decorative black gargoyle statue on the roof. Nigma got out of the police car and put on his glasses, turned around and leaned against the car window waving his hands. This is a great night, thank you, friend. Niji, who had just unbuckled his seatbelt, laughed with satisfaction when he heard these words, good evening, friend. Watching Nigma walk into the apartment building, Niji opened the door, stood on the street and took out a box of cool thin cigars from his arms, holding one in his mouth and lighting it with a lighter. Scanning the surroundings with vigilant eyes, there were a few sly gangsters on the opposite street. Niji held a thin cigar in his hand, opened his coat, and showed off his revolver. The gangsters left immediately after seeing the revolver. Rich people in Gotham may be humiliated. But people with guns will gain respect wherever they go. In the apartment building, Nigma returned to his home and skillfully turned on the light, and the room lit up. He took off his gold-rimmed glasses and placed them on the cabinet next to him. There was also a pair of black half-rimmed glasses on top. The room was neatly tidied, and there were many books on the bookshelf that separated the room. Nigma stood in front of an easel with a finished oil painting on it, and a paint tray and brushes next to it. The oil painting shows a man sitting on a sofa, staring at a green question mark in front of him. There is also a series of words written in white paint on the painting. I can fill a room or a heart, others can have me but I cannot be shared. What am I, lonely? Nigma looked at the oil painting in silence, softly recited the answer to the puzzle, walked to the wall and put down the phonograph stylus. Soft music sounded from inside. Unintentionally seeing the swaying curtains, Nigma walked over and closed the window, but saw a flashing red in the darkness downstairs. He turned his head and looked outside. Seeing that the police car was still parked in the same place, Nigma chuckled in surprise, and quickly walked to the wall and turned off the lights. Niji, who was downstairs, was about to light another cigarette, but when he looked up, he saw that the lighted window on the 4th floor had turned dark. He seemed to be sleeping, so he threw away the cigarette butt in his hand. Niji yawned and looked around again before driving the police car and leaving. Nigma, who was upstairs watching the police car leave here, had a meaningful smile in his eyes. The fewer you have, the more precious your friends are. After the police car left here, it drove towards the more shabby areas of the Lower East Side. It was already late at night. A black car stopped on the side of the road and saw the approaching police car flashing its double flashing lights. The police car stopped, and Niji got out of the car and walked towards the car. Oswald, who had just returned from duty at the Rome Casino, opened the door and yawned. Mr. Police Officer, you are really busy. Here you go. Oswald said jokingly as he took out an envelope from the car and threw it to Niji. The envelope was heavy. Thank you, that's a big help. Niji quickly took it. What are you doing in such a hurry for money? Oswald leaned against the car, inserted a cigarette into a thin cigarette holder, and lit one. Niji shook the $20,000 in his hand and said, I used these bills to buy an SSS card. SSS card? What is that? Oswald raised his eyebrows, not quite understanding what Niji was talking about. Let's put it this way, I met a very powerful guy, and this place is very powerful. Niji pointed at his head. For example, if I am an S, then his brain can match 3 of me. Do you know what this concept is? I have a brain trust. When Oswald heard this, he looked like he suddenly understood something, and seemed to have figured something out. Wait a minute, you mean, you bribed with money? In short, you used this to bribe, and then you got a guy with a very powerful brain, people. Niji nodded, the show-off look and smile on his face not concealed at all. He was really happy. Oswald licked his lips with his tongue, as if he had made a heavy decision. I understand. What do you understand? Niji asked with some confusion. Nothing, but... Oswald looked at the banknotes in Niji's hand, hesitated and asked, can I lend you a little less? What do you want to do? I know a few young people who are good at studies, but they don't have money to go to college. I thought I would sponsor them to go to college. What the hell are you? Niji swallowed the second half of his sentence. A gang member must also be a good person. 10,000. I can give you a free note over there. Thank you. Oswald took the $10,000 and said with a somewhat embarrassed smile, those guys are really good at studying. It's such a waste in such a rubbish place. I believe your decision is right. If I had more money, I would do the same. Niji reached out and patted Oswald on the shoulder. The person you are looking for already has a clue. Call the puppet master. We will investigate him soon. I will let Otis inform you then. Pay attention to the rats around you. Mouse? Yes, you can prepare some bread. If a light brown mouse comes to you, it's called Bastion and he likes sweets. Niji smiled and waved his hands and walked towards the police car, leaving Oswald alone who was thinking about what a mouse was.